Welcome to the Lisa Show Book Club. I'm really excited to have Ganel-Lyn Condie here with me today. Thank you for being here.
I'm excited.
This is part 4 of our book club look into Alone Together by Sherry Turkle. We're excited to really dive into this book. We're really to the halfway point. If you haven't had a chance to check out parts 1, 2, and 3, I really encourage you to. We've talked about a lot of really great themes as they come along. But without further ado, we're going to get into some of the themes with chapters 8 and 9, growing up, always on and growing up tethered for this particular section. So I thought it was really interesting when we're talking about this book, Alone Together, that this section starts with cyborgs. I thought you would really think that was really great. I'd love to start off with that, of just having technology. Yes, it's just a tool, but like you're one with it so that it doesn't like interrupt your flow. But I was kind of feeling called out when I read but that's how we all are. Like, how often are you without your phone? And how do you feel when you don't have your phone? How do you feel if you don't always have everything? And this connection, it also has a connectivity and, as Sherry puts it, offers new possibilities for experimenting with identity. So I'm curious as to how you feel about how technology is kind of changing the ways that we see ourselves.
Well, I do think at times it pulls me out of being intentional in the moment, because I think my online persona and the work that I try to do there, I feel like there's always a little bit of a filter of, is this an experience that I would share? Instead of just being like, I just had lunch with a friend and I just was like, phones down, be here, be intentional. And I think sometimes we believe that certain influencers are curating their online persona, but I feel like the author makes the case that we all at some level do that because we pick and choose what we share.
Yeah, you can't do everything or even like live stream everything. I think it's not necessarily the Truman Show, but yet the Truman Show where you're constantly videoed from every angle and nothing is unfiltered isn't as maybe out of this world as you might as it was when that movie came out.
It's like literal your avatar in some way, right? And it does at times wig me out a little when I encounter people in public that I realize I've offered this information about my life. They may not be offering it as much on their profiles or on their end. And so they know everything really that I've shared, and they're up to speed. Like, they know what's happening with my kids and what new book I have out and blah, blah. And I really don't know anything about them.
And it puts you on unequal footing as like a friendship. That's so funny because at the end of this chapter, and so I'm kind of like skipping ahead, but that's what you do in a good book club, right? You just skip ahead, where your fans become friends or your friends are fans. It's kind of a different phenomenon. Because I would be hard pressed to think that anyone would think, oh yeah, maybe this isn't true. I don't know that I'm posing the question. I'm rethinking it. But let me finish the sentence. Yeah, of like if on Facebook or Instagram, for example, all of the people that you're friends with, that you friended or invited onto this platform, are they friends in real life? All of them. Do you know them? And like you said, even if you do, it is unequal depending on who shares.
And who's just the consumer or the voyeur, really, the voyeur. And I think the book makes a really interesting case about these like play life experiences. I don't go there. Like, I don't have an alternative.
Like Second Life or an avatar on a game or World of Warcraft or something.
That's not, I can't speak to that firsthand, but I realized that in anything that we're curating socially on these public platforms, we are in an essence giving a snapshot of our lives. And depending on what you share or don't share, you're giving a version of what I try to, like, personally, I try to give a wide variety of posts so that people don't always think it's always this amazing hanging out with Lisa on the Lisa Show, right?
Well,
there's other things happening in my life, but I think we get the perception sometimes that everyone's in Hawaii, everyone's got a new car,
is in Hawaii.
Right? Everyone's kid got a scholarship to Harvard.
Yep.
Everyone's checking all the boxes.
Everyone has grandbabies. That's
hint,
the one for
wink, wink.
I'm too young to have children. But.
But I think that what was fascinating to me about the book too is that it's an updated version. So there were moments.
Isn't that fascinating?
It really was, like, because the way she hasn't edited it out in the updated version, all of how important Facebook was at one point. It's still for me.
But in 2017, it was different.
It was like the thing that teenagers were really thinking through. No way now. Teenagers are like, what?
They're like, it's chuggy.
Yeah. And also Instagram is even old. Like, what? You're not on Snap or TikTok, then you're like, so that was an interesting kind of pass through the past for me.
What do you think that it teaches us? Because the book brings this up, and Sherry talks a lot about her research. She does a lot of case studies of like, I tried this, and then I wanted to see where these trends. What do you think that it's saying then about the path that we're on towards technology kind of shaping our identities? Because now we have had a few more years, 5 years since the last publication of this, to see how it's shaping our identities, our family's identities, friends. What have you observed?
Well, I do feel like there was some cringy moments for me. And as I was reading about the specific example she gave of like executives that can't really go on vacation and they're trying to use vacation where there's not Wi-Fi so that they really can disconnect. I think that's a huge red flag on any of our mental health if we're always on, which is the title of the chapter, right?
Yeah.
That feeling of every email you answer could create a snowball of 10 more emails.
Yes, I remember that part of the book. I was the same thing of like,
Yeah.
it's true because you have the illusion of productivity, but it is kind of creating more work. And it's interesting because at the beginning of the book, she talks a lot about how we want technology to solve our problems, right? And we've set it up.
It's this tool.
And I think we thought we were doing that.
Right.
I think we thought we were solving all these problems to create more leisure time for us to spend with our families. And it has, in reality, created less time. We're busier than ever.
My husband and I have two very different careers, but we use technology in specific ways to do our jobs. And I did have a conversation with him the other day. He's not a doctor, but he works with doctors. It sounds like he plays them on TV, but he works with them. And I said to him, if you were a doctor, it sometimes feels that you're always on call doctor. And even doctors have days they're on call and days they're not on call because it takes a toll when you're always on call. And so I think an alternative chapter heading for this is always on call. Like the fact that you can always get an email and always get a text.
And you expect the person to send one immediately back, not like wait a day or two or 5.
Right. And then what does that say about what we feel about each other on professional levels, not just the personal levels, which she does some really good case studies that were sad for me of these alternative lives in these alternative universes where people are more comfortable in their fake avatar land world than they are in their real life and their real kids and their real marriage. That was sad to me. I think it's easy if you're not a part of those to think, oh my gosh, that's so sad for those people.
But it's not shocking, is it?
But it's not shocking. And I think the reality is if you're constantly answering email, are you ever at home or are you really always at work as well? Is that not an alternative identity as well?
Or are you face to face? You know, and those case studies that she dives into also have a different kind of effect on our kids than I think we thought they would. I had this moment reading in this chapter of, oh, I do this, you know, where I felt a little bit of guilt, not because I thought I was doing something right. So specifically, I like what she says about the internet's effect on young people is paradoxical. It's easier to play with identity, but harder to leave the past behind. Like you make a mistake, it is recorded. It's there forever. When we were teenagers and nobody was like taking video and pictures of everything that we did.
Right. We had to wait till like lunch on Tuesday, maybe Wednesday to find out if you didn't get invited to a party on the weekend.
Yeah.
Instantaneous, you know now.
And so that's helping to shape their identity, but also it inhibits teens to turn away from real-time demands. Role-playing games are community, but exhibit an unexpected nostalgia that they haven't even experienced, right? And they resent the devices. And I've seen teenagers, and she talks about how teenagers are interviewed and they're like, oh, I wish there was a time there where we didn't have it. So they resent it, but yet they're never without them, and they don't want you to take them away. So it's this paradox of that they're growing up in, and they feel it, I think, even more intently than we did. I thought I was doing a big favor and being a responsible parent by always knowing where my kids were. And one of the main reasons why I gave them a cell phone was so I would know exactly where they were. And if I text them, boy, they better text me back
because we're paying the bill. Yeah.
But I didn't realize that teenagers used to, as part of a necessary development of identity, have autonomy and have time and space alone to figure stuff out. But they know these kids are always tethered. They always know, oh, if I get in trouble, I just go out, I call mom, I text dad or whatever.
Right.
And that's their solution. They don't figure it out on their own.
Right. And
there's a cost for that.
That in chapter 9 specifically on the growing up tethered, I thought it was so interesting how it was like, when was the last time you felt that you didn't want to be interrupted? And I thought for a moment, like, when was the last time I was in a situation where I thought, I really don't want to know what's happening on my phone, and I don't want to respond to anyone on my phone because I am so present. I gave my son his first little like kid cell phone, which you could only do those like 3 programmed phone numbers. It fell in water pretty quickly after we invested in it. But I was going through some health stuff, and we lived on a street where everyone just hopped from backyard to backyard. And I was pretty sick, and I wanted to be able to get a hold of him. And yet I remember summer days where like goodbye in the morning,
you would
and then
see
kick
your
the
parents
can at
all
night,
day.
and it was dark, and then we finally would crawl back into the house. And I think we romanticize a little bit of what that was like, but I think she does a really good job. So that's the cost. But I see now my kids that are in college, we have communication now that I can support them, that if it was just based on phone calls, like when I was in college where I had to like call collect home, I think
and you were looking at the clock to see how much it cost per minute?
Yes. And the operator never said my name right when she called collect. She was like, collect call from Dino, and my family was like, yeah, Dino's calling again, and it was me, because she could never, my kids don't even understand trying to get change and put it into the right. And so am I grateful that during finals week, I can hear from my college daughter and I can send her funny memes and she can say, this is how my mental health is going, and she's not just isolated in her dorm room? Yeah, I am. But I think that's interesting as I look at both my kids progressing. Have they had enough of that autonomy time where they're not connected?
When do they have the right to be alone? And if we don't give that to adults, then for sure we're not giving it to teenagers. And we're hovering in this idea of helicopter parenting. We always blame the mom. We blame the moms for everything.
Yes.
As if we've created this. But society is built up this way.
Right.
If you don't know where your kids are, you're a bad mom.
Right.
If they're
There's
alone.
bumper pads all the time.
And this free range parenting and things like that, like our identities are already being shaped by our technology. But I worry that it's crossed the balance. And these chapters made me like really rethink this in a different way. And Sherry Turkle made me think.
Yes.
Sherry Turkle makes me think, because she said, when is downtime? When is stillness? And talked about Huck Finn, which I really, really loved. The rite of, and the rite of passage. That whole story is a rite of passage, right? Where you're discovering and figuring out everything in kind of a dramatic way, right? Away from parents. But now that's been transformed.
Well, and I love what she said. Traditionally, development of intimacy requires some privacy.
Oh, I loved
that was
part.
huge. I was like, underline,
how can you be intimate with somebody if you don't have the assumption of privacy?
Right.
But now we have less and less assumption of privacy. So that, of course, is affecting our intimacy levels.
Intimacy without privacy reinvents what intimacy means. Separation, too, is being reinvented. So, like, I think
we're reinventing what it means.
We're reinventing everything. But I did love, like, I think I'm of the age where it's like, in the good old days, like, we had to go to the library and check out an encyclopedia and do
bubblegum cost $0.25.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I hear myself sometimes talking that way, and I loved the analogy she gave that so much of what we don't have because of technology, there is a version of that in the 80s and 70s that was also happening. The example she gives is that like when you're on vacation, or she gives students that are on study abroad, they're really never in that other country because they still know what's happening back at home.
Yeah, they never leave home.
They never really leave home. She gives the analogy of, do you remember the day where you would go on family vacation, but you'd still be writing handwritten letters to your boyfriend because you missed them so much? And I thought, oh, we were always, as teenagers, those other people outside of our family became so important. Well, now it's just tethered by a phone, but we were trying to create that same tethering, but it was old school way, right? With a stamp and an envelope or a postcard.
Right.
So were we never really, like, are we romanticizing this escapism that we thought we didn't do? Because I think we did it in different ways.
Because I'm thinking like a specific, I remember when I went home for Christmas one time, and it was the first time I had ever been away from my boyfriend for 2 weeks. I mean, we hung out every day. This is before cell phones and everything.
Right.
And it was 2 weeks of not knowing what he was doing, who he was hanging out with. We just, I don't know why, but we just decided, oh no, I think we just called each other on Christmas, but to kind of see how we really felt about each other.
Did you really feel?
And I feel that time and that space of not talking to him made me miss him in a way.
And have clarity.
That gave me clarity of that.
Which is, I think, what
really
she's
wanted
saying.
it. And had I not had that, had I just been texting him all day, every day, what would have been different?
Right.
Had we been like FaceTiming and
Right.
texting and, oh, now I'm going to do that, it wouldn't have seemed so romantic of being separated by time and distance. And I do not forget that time when we saw each other, when he came over to my apartment when I got back
And
from.
it was like slow motion running.
It was
to
like
each other.
slow motion and wind blowing in my hair. And I looked at him and I was like,
I love you so much.
100%.
Yeah. I do.
I married that boy, Ganel-Lyn. I married him.
did.
Yes, but all I'm saying is that we underestimate that stillness, that time, that separation.
space.
We don't even talk about it.
Right, right. And you know what? I did try to intentionally realize that when my kids chose to go to college pretty close to home, like not out of state, that I had to create a fake version of that separation.
Oh, interesting.
So I remember saying both my kids were different on how much they wanted to communicate. Shocker, right? But I remember saying like to my daughter recently, you know, I'm purposefully not texting for this whole day to just create, because she's about to leave.
Yeah.
And leave the state for an extended period of time. And I've realized, like, I've seen her on weekends because college was close enough. She could text, she could Marco Polo, FaceTime me, whatever. And so I do love the idea of creating maybe some ways of doing a pseudo autonomy and break so that we're aware of the blessing or the benefit of having the technology and the connection, but also maybe putting language. She doesn't offer it in this chapter, but that's where my brain went of like, wait, how did I kind of problem solve that? Or how have I created a pseudo version of this to accommodate it? Because I do worry, I don't want my kid to go out and feel like mom was always there.
Well, and I think that you're doing in this true spirit of what Sherry is calling for, which is to be more intentional about your decisions and how we use technology. It should be a tool that benefits us and not just something that happens to us and redefines relationships and autonomy in ways that we didn't intend. And I love what she says, that autonomy and strong personal boundaries are reliable signs of a successfully maturing self. And she makes the case that if we expect to grow up and be mature, and that was going to strengthen relationships. And how can you ever have a strong, relationship or marriage if you don't have a mature sense of self? And if you're never alone and you don't know that, the gold standards tarnishes if a phone is always in hand. And I was really struck by how, like, in the olden days or before technology, just to be able to see how far we've come. If you had a college freshman that called home 15 times a day saying, well, what kind of deodorant should I buy?
This too.
What should I go to class or should I take a nap? Should I do it? And if you just, for every little decision, if that,
It would have been a flag.
it would have been a flag like, she's not thriving. We need to get her some counseling and that's not okay. So what's the difference that now if you're texting your mom or your dad or whatever to problem solve and make all those decisions for you all day long? If you sent 15 texts, nobody would bat an eye
Right.
now. So what has changed? What's changed then is what Sherry says is our definition of what being connected and what being autonomous.
And I've seen
That's
with
the
my own
difference.
kids that it has been a healthy mental health tool on the flip side of that, technology can be not great for your mental health, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the saddest parts that she kind of explores is that you, without the separation from social and tech, you don't get that sense of who you really are.
Yes.
And I would say too, like, this is where you can see kind of the date mark of her research, that Facebook and friend requests became that whole junior high brain.
Yeah.
I think right now it would probably be more like followers on Instagram or views on
followers and likes.
or views of your video or whatever that is, or likes, right? I do think that was such a beautiful, like, reminder to adults that junior high brain is still alive and well. It just shows up in a different way.
It's
for sure.
Like, I wondered too about this. I had never considered this, but how technology and how we're redefining autonomy and self. You kind of think, oh, so what? Who cares? But it actually plays into a narcissistic, like, lifestyle. Like, it actually rewards narcissists.
I know.
So she says a personality is so fragile that it needs constant support. Like, we think we're doing, like, reassuring our kids all the time and helping them solve their problems with technology and ourselves too. I keep saying, like, kids as if we're, like, immune to it.
Right.
We're not. Constant support, that's a narcissism. And narcissistic self gets on with others by dealing only with their made to measure representations. I will only need, like, I need this from you. I need this right now. And that's it. Right. Others are part object if it's not gratified. Well, if you can't answer my text, then I'm just going to text this girl, or I'm just going to do this, or I'm just going to swipe somebody else.
It was like, wait, this friend isn't going to validate my feelings.
Oh, then I'll go
I'm going to
somewhere
text
else.
my other friend.
But dealing with people and how nuanced they are in relationships
and we don't meet each other's needs.
Forgiving and taking time out to, for human frailty and working that kind out is not rewarded with the way we're using technology now.
Listen,
and I think that's groundbreaking.
It is groundbreaking, and I do think she calls out the parents. Like, it was a little ouchy of how many times did my kids come home and I'm working from home, and so I'm saying hi, but I'm really back to the computer, or I'm checking the phone, or they've watched their parents check while they're driving, or right? And then they're going to do better, and then they slip right back into it. It's almost like this whole social structure. I just wonder how many times we all feel invisible and ignored.
Yeah.
And we make it...
And put on hold.
Yeah, and we make it look like it's just an adolescent issue, that it's affecting their inability to have eye contact, the nuance you just said, the complexities of human spirit and frailties. It's the adults, too, that are like... multitask all the time. And I think especially for moms, I just think working moms that are trying to also
hold it together.
And there's certain stages of mothering where, like, to have that outside of your house connection beyond diapers and the same bills and the same dishes, there's power in that. Right?
Yeah,
but where's the line where then all of a sudden I'm in the phase where they're out of the house and I'm like, come back, let's do more Legos. I'll put my phone down. Like, I'm having those regret feelings. And when I was reading these chapters specifically, I was like, yeah, how many times did I kind of cycle in like, wait, I've become too tethered. I need to have more boundaries with myself so that my family sees that I'm present, or my friends see that I'm here.
I think that's what a good book does, right? Like, it makes you feel, it presents you with the information and lays it out in a way that said, this is what I've observed, and for her as, an analyst and dealing with the psychology of how people really, really interact with each other, is saying, this is what all my research has said. This is what I've observed. When I talked to all of these experts, this is what they said. And she just kind of lays it out right here in the middle of it and just said, this is what I see. And then kind of steps away from it, and you get to draw your own conclusions. I really identified at the end of the chapter, like with Brad, when he said, it's too much, even the minimum is too exhausting, of like, you gotta like post something or decide what you're gonna post and then respond to people, like, and all the platforms, it's just too much.
And
I know a lot of people like that, and he was exhausted, but he said, I'm also thinking of myself in a bad way, because he said you get reduced to a list of favorite things, and it feels like reduction and betrayal to yourself. Like, well, this isn't like who I really am. This is just a little part of me. and none of us can do it perfectly.
And
So it makes us feel like we're reduced to a few things. It doesn't even help our core self feel great.
When you addressed body issues on your previous series, I think it's the same thing. Like, is our technology reducing us? Is our bodies reducing us? Are we becoming so myopic in how we're defining who we are? And it's easy to do that. I do love, though, that she was super self-revealing when she's like, I've done all this research, and this is all the stuff, and this is what it costs. But my daughter now lives somewhere else, and I'm really glad she's texting me all the time. Like, all of a sudden, as a researcher, she's like, no, I don't want to give up on it because this is so powerful when it comes to that anxiety. We haven't even talked about that, right? Like 9/11 and the anxiety of like, did anyone answer the phone call or the text?
Like why we feel like we have, because of an emergency, we have to be.
I've done that as a mom where I can see.
But it creates more anxiety.
Right. And you can track and you're all of a sudden like, wait, where are they? And why have they been there for 4 hours and not answering the phone? So it's a whole new dynamic of what does it mean for our parenting? What does it mean for our psychosis when we show up in like, I have to be careful. Like, I kind of knew why you were on that date for so long and what was going on there. And I'm thinking my parents wouldn't know unless I had told them any of that information. And so it is fascinating. I would love, my point in saying all of that is I'd love to see like the third edit version of this 5 years from now.
Right.
Because you can see there's been this progression of where technology was, what research she did when she wrote the first version of the book, where it changed so much that she had to do an additional version. I kept wondering while I was reading, what would be the edits in a version of this 5 years from now?
And that's why I really appreciate you coming on, Ganel-Lyn, and doing a great job of talking about the themes of this, because I do really feel like the themes, particularly in these chapters 8 and 9, are things that we will be talking about in the future. And they're better questions than, well, how much time are you on?
Exactly.
It gets more to the heart of it.
They're more complex because it is complex. It's good and it's bad. It's not all one thing.
So thank you so much for being a part of the Lisa Show Book Club. We have been in part 4, chapters 8 and 9. We have all of these different sections that you can go back and look at, 1, 2, and 3. I hope you will. And join us next week as we are in section 5. We're going to be looking at chapters 10 and 11 and talking about, well, will we ever make a phone call again?